Okay, so the numbers are stabilizing. Welcome to today's webinar for managing ArcGIS in higher education, preparing for the coming licensing changes. I'm Addy Pope. I manage higher education in Esri UK. I'm joined by my colleague Benny. We're going to co-present this. I'm going to see if my voice lasts a full hour. I am a bit croaky at the moment, but let's get going and see how we go. Let's be able to change the slides. So the agenda for today's webinar is to look at what these changes are and when they are going to happen. Most of you should already know what the changes are and when they're going to happen, but this is a reminder. And for anybody that doesn't know, we're going to explain what they are in full. We're also going to have a little look at why the changes are happening, what advantages it might bring you in the way that you manage ArcGIS across your institution or for your teaching and researchers on how they use GIS or how they access it. And we're also going to give you a fair amount of information that will help you prepare for those changes. For the housekeeping for this call, I don't have a slide on housekeeping, but it's fairly obvious. You're all on mute by default. There's a chat window where you can ask questions, and we'll come to the questions at the end. If you get to that point and you feel that your question is better communicated verbally rather than typing, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, and then you can just you can say your question, because sometimes it's a lot easier just to say it. Okay, so let's make a start into the actual content. What are the changes? Well, the changes are that ArcMap licenses will expire on the 31st of July 2024. And the second change is that your ESU and EFL codes, so those are your single use and your concurrent use licenses for ArcGIS Pro, will also expire on the 31st of July 2024. So this information has been communicated throughout the renewal process, and those dates are still the dates that we are expecting those two things to cease. Why are the changes happening? Well, ArcMap as a product, or ArcGIS Desktop as it's also known, is retiring, or is being retired on the 31st of March 2024. It goes into what's called extended sort of support, but all customers are not being renewed of that product in 2024. So there are ways for some customers to get access to 2026. We are not included in that. Our licensees renew on an annual basis. So when they renew in 2024, they go dead. Even though we're on a 3-year deal, our licensees get renewed every year. So our date is the 1st of August 2024. There's a little subtlety of what's going to happen between March and July. And it's important to reiterate that at this point, that ArcMap as a product will not receive any updates, security patches, or anything else beyond the 1st of April. So as a piece of software sitting on your network, it becomes a bit more of a risk. It's not being maintained by Esri, and you need to be aware of that. Universities are large organizations, and you want to keep them as secure as possible, and IT security is something that we should all be aware of. But for you, ArcMap will become less secure, potentially less secure, beyond the 1st of April, because we, Esri, will not be maintaining that software. Okay, so named user licenses, and why are we making that change? Well, really, named users unlock more of the ArcGIS system than a license code for one product. And all customers in the Esri landscape will be migrating to that method of licensing over 2024. So it's a company-wide change, not just something that's been foisted on education. So don't feel like this is just happening to education, it's happening across the business. So I'm now going to go into a bit more detail on each of those 2 points, but I thought I would headline the changes and the rationale for them right at the start. So those are the main takeaways, that these 2 things are happening, and the date for both of them happening is the 31st of July 2024. So ArcMap's retirement, well, it's long overdue in my opinion. We've been talking about the demise of ArcMap for what feels like a long time, at least 5 years, but it seems to finally be happening. And our licensees in my Esri, so this is a screen grab of my Esri, have changed to show the 31st of July 2024. It's an American date system, so it does read as the 7/31/2024, but hopefully you can understand that. Now, that's a subtle change from what we actually got deployed into our accounts when we renewed the licenses in the summer. They were actually showing 2026, and that was annoying because it was different to the message that I had given the community. Uh, and it wasn't that things had changed, it was a subtlety of the way that the licenses are generated within the system. And the team that looks after licensing in the States then went into they had to retrospectively change those licenses. So they had to set them for the 3-year agreement, i.e., to the 31st of July 2026, and then move them back to the 31st of July 2024. I appreciate that that's confusing. It did cause confusion and mixed messaging, but those dates have now been changed in your MyEsri accounts. And if you go in and check, they should be reading 7/31/2024. ArcMap is well past its sell-by date, in my opinion, and most of you have already moved away from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. Inwardly, I'm a slightly more worried by the people that don't attend these calls who may be blissfully unaware of that change, but that is my problem, and I will have to chase down those people and try and get the message to them. But if you're on this call, hopefully it's clear that ArcMap is going and you won't have access to it after the 31st of July 2024. Well, wait a minute. What about all the stuff that my academics tell me they can't do anywhere except ArcMap? And they can't live without ArcMap because, well, there's a really good blog which is in the Esri community, and you will get access to these slides and all of the links after the presentation in the follow-up email. So don't worry. But this blog, I can't live without ArcMap because plugins, add-ons, and well, Jerry Garcia, but we'll not talk about that. There's a really good table in here. I'm not going to open it up at the moment, but will I open it up? Yeah, we'll live dangerously. We'll not live as dangerously as that because I have to find it. There it is. Bear with me. So this is a really good blog. Brian, who's part of the education team in the States, the global education team, has put this together, and he's listed plugins that the community have said, we've got users in our institution that rely on ArcMap because of heck GeoRAS. And then he's put in the current plans for each one of those things. Download ArcHydro for free here. So apparently most of the functionality is offered in ArcHydro. So for your users that are saying, got to keep me on ArcMap because I use this heck GeoRAS, please forward them the download for ArcHydro or get that to your users. And Brian is doing a really good job of curating this list. If there's something that's not on the list, please feel free to add it to the comments. And Brian looks at this weekly and he'll then do the hard work of finding out what the continuity plan for that plugin is. Brian is good. Brian is putting this list together, so please use it. So that's a great resource. And I think it will answer some of those niggly questions from your user community. And honestly, there aren't many reasons why you need to use ArcMap. You should be using ArcGIS Pro, and this blog goes a long way to demonstrate that. Okay, so moving into the second point, moving towards named user licensing. So ESU codes and EFL codes for ArcGIS Pro will expire on the 31st of July 2024. Beyond that, named users will be the only way of licensing ArcGIS Pro. So that hopefully is not a surprise for most of you, but if it is, we're going to spend some time thinking about what that means and how you would actually provision use for your user community in your university. You will see from the screen grab that I'm looking at authorizations for ArcGIS Pro, And those dates have also changed to reflect the date that I've mentioned, the 31st of July 2024. And again, those were initially set to 2026. I apologize for that. That was something that was unavoidable at the MyEsri end, apparently, but that team have now migrated those dates to be the correct date, which is the 31st of July 2024. So how will we access ArcGIS on the 1st of August 2024? Well, access will be through named user identities. And named user identities will be used to access ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, field apps such as Survey123, and field maps, and lots more. Actually, it unlocks the entire ArcGIS system. As Benny said this morning on a catch-up call, but named user identities pretty much unlock absolutely everything, and they do. Um, we're actually in a reasonably good place. Um, there are about 35% of the universities in the UK and Ireland are already using single sign-on. That number is actually higher than I expected. And the intelligence to get that number, I was completely blind to. Somebody in the States, Brian, who I've alluded to already, has written a script which actually pulls all the information out. And we're at about 35%. So we need to convert that number to be higher. And Benny and I need to give you all the support that we possibly can to get you towards an SSO solution. Because honestly, I think it removes a lot of the problems with managing users on a daily basis. Not all of them, but most of them. My job, Benny's job, is to try and understand the problems that it doesn't solve and help find solutions to those problems. And that's going to be really the focus of our work over the next 6 to 9 months. Right, here's an interesting slide, which I was in two minds whether or not to include, but I think it should be. I always try and be honest with the community. And what you could say is, they told us that ArcMap was disappearing multiple times, and we still have access to it. I don't believe anything's going to change, so I'm not going to do anything. Are we the boy that cried wolf? Now, discussion, as Benny said, if it's the boy that cried wolf, why is there a fox on the image? It's the best I could do. With what I had available. The message is clear. Yesterday, I spoke to the head of global education and I had a list of questions and said, what's actually going to happen? They're like, hey, Addy, the dates are set. The message is clear. I've asked up the chain and I've been told this is happening. So we have to expect this to happen. And we have to prepare for these changes because if we don't, uh, they are going to happen. So we would fall off a licensing cliff. So don't think just because ArcMap got an extension and an extension and an extension that ESU and EFL codes will also be given an extension. We have to plan for them disappearing on the 31st of July 2024. So why are the changes really happening? And on those ESU and EFL codes, I think the changes are really happening because, as I've already mentioned, the named user identity really does unlock a lot more than just one application, one desktop application. It unlocks the integration of that desktop application with cloud storage, with data which you get as a subscribing customer to Esri. So there's a lot of subscription data in the Living Atlas that you only get if you have, what would you call it? A maintenance license, I suppose is our technical term, but you're a paying customer. It unlocks the integration of mobile phones that you can collect data on to a cloud storage system, a cloud GIS, and a desktop GIS. And it enables the production, curation, and maintenance of things like dashboards, experience builders, which take all of that GIS data and make it accessible to end user communities. It's no different to the migration that we have seen in other large software vendors. And Esri is not as large as these other software vendors. And the ones that I'm highlighting are Microsoft with its Office 365, which I think a lot of us rely on. It still has desktop components. You can still have stuff on your desktop, but that stuff is also mirrored with a lightweight cloud-based version. So Word on your desktop versus Word in the cloud, and you have seamless access. And many people have been saving stuff on their desktop and pushing it to the cloud. But more often than not now, you're just connected to the internet anyway. So the document always resides in the cloud and you edit it on your desktop, but it's saving it back to the cloud. And that means that you can then share it with Benny. Like I did this presentation to prepare this, I created it, shared it into the cloud. Benny has also modified it as well. That's the way that Microsoft works. And the other one is Adobe's Creative Cloud. You have a cloud identity for your Adobe Creative Cloud account, and then that unlocks all of the desktops and all of the sharing capabilities. And we're doing the same, and we're not even in the same league as those companies in terms of size, scale, and breadth. But we're moving in the same direction as these other companies into sort of like cloud authentication. And it should be good for your users. So, supporting you to make the change. This is where Benny takes over and I get to drink some hot water and come back a little bit later on. Are you ready, Benny?
Yes, are my slides coming through?
They're coming through and you're coming through as well.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Adi, for that overview of the upcoming license changes and why they are happening. We wanted to take a bit of time to show you some resources to support you to make sure that you are in a good position when these changes will take effect. So to get started with, let's have a look at how we can set up named users. So there are several ways that one can go by this. The easiest way is to set up individual users through your ArcGIS online organization, and you can go through a wizard where you just put down the details and send an email to the user who will be then able to set up their account for ArcGIS online, which will then license all of the ArcGIS products. So this is quick and flexible. You can also batch create up to 200 users at a time using an Excel template. So if you have, for example, a course of students that you want to add, you can just put that Excel sheet together and upload that in the wizard. It also helps if you have a default user role configured and enabled. So you can add that user role in, for example, a default student role, so the admins don't have to go through each of the licenses one by one, but all the template will be there to do that for you. We also have resources how to add users. So once again, we'll share the slides, and I'll show you some other resources as well where you can find these. But we have step-by-step instructions how to do this to make your job easier. So our recommended way of setting up named users, and Adi has touched on this earlier, is by implementing single sign-on for your organization. Some of the bigger identity providers that work with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise are Microsoft ADFS, or Entra as it's known now, Google Workspace, Okta, and there are more as well. You can find out the full list in the official Esri SSO documentation, which you can click on this image there that will take you there, or just by a quick Google ArcGIS Online SSO, and usually the first thing will be the documentation you need. As Adi has mentioned, about 35% of Esri UK or UK and Ireland institutions on chest agreements have SSO implemented, and we'd like to see that number go up a bit, as this is the easiest way to enable access across your campus to ArcGIS Online. Some things to consider about implementing SSO is that you need the right people to enable SSO for your organization. Usually, these people are sit in the IT department, and they are the identity experts who have access to the university's active directory. Um, if you need help with conversations with the right people, let us know and we can help with that. There's also really good documentation from Esri with step-by-step instructions that you can use to help implement SSO. And it's not just Esri that has good documentation, but also a lot of the IT or identity providers have some. So for example, Microsoft has really good instructions how to implement Entra for ArcGIS Online and the Enterprise. Some other things that you can consider is we can help with setting up a new ArcGIS Online node to test SSO. And this is to make sure that there are no disruptions for your main teaching and research ArcGIS online organization. And a lot of universities in the past year have approached us with questions about an EU-hosted ArcGIS online organization. And this is a good opportunity to set up a new AGOL with SSO implemented on an EU-hosted node. If that's of interest for you, you can test it, how it works, and you can start with a clean canvas. So as I mentioned, SG community with Brian's post on the plugins. There's loads of good resources there. You can access, you can log into your community by opening ArcGIS Online and navigating to your profile icon. And if you click on that and hit SG community on the dropdown, you'll be taken to the website logged in, and you can start engaging with your community. It works a bit like Reddit. If you use Reddit, you'll know there will be different subreddits. It's the same here. There's a higher education channel, for example, that you can bookmark, and you can come back to all the discussion that happened there. There's some really good resources to help you with transitioning to modern GIS, and it's a good place to engage, not just with Esri employees, but with other people who are going through similar changes as your organization will have. And it's not just about the articles, but about the discussions that happen in the comment section as well. So make sure to scroll down, engage, leave feedback, leave a comment, and that can help others, or you can find help for your problem. So the last resource I want to bring to your attention is Lecture with GIS, which we're going to show for you now. If you haven't came across this website yet, this is a website that Adi and myself manage, and we collate all the most up-to-date information for our users here. So all things about higher education, be that learning resources, data sets for lecturers or students, or resources for managing your organization, you can find everything here. The resources that we have shared today will be accessible from a new page that we have created for you, which is called Modern GIS. You can access it from the header if you click it here, or from this link here. So let's just click that for now. And you can find out more information what Modern GIS is, as well as a video about named user licensing and how it works. All of the resources that we have showed today will be here and more. We're not going to go into that in depth today, but make sure to bookmark this website and come back to it, as it might change, as we might add more stuff for you that we think is helpful. You will be also you'll be able to access the slides and the recordings from the webinar here, as well as from an email that we'll send you after this webinar. And the last thing I want to show you here is I have embedded a form to the bottom of this page, and I also leave a link in the chat. But if you click on it, it will open up a survey 123, which is part of the ArcGIS system. But more importantly, we want to hear from you, and we would like to know what are the challenges that you might face with the upcoming changes. How prepared do you think you are for these, and also some a place where you can leave general comments about the changes. So if you could all take a moment, take a couple of minutes and go through this survey and submit, we would really appreciate that. Thanks, Eddie, for sharing that as well. I sent a second one just in case. But we do go through these answers, and we can use the feedback from here to tailor our resources and our communication towards you. So with that, I'll hand it back to Adi, if I can find the right slides. But thank you, and yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Benny. Hopefully that was a good run through of the material that we've created already. But that form, to reiterate what Benny was saying, it really does help us help you. If you think there's information that is missing that would either help make the case for these changes or just allow you to better implement them or quicker implement them, please let us know, because we will then work on that to support you. That's what we're here for. So the main call for action in this meeting is that if you think SSO is really the path that you want to go down, then we're going to run a second webinar specifically on SSO, and it's kind of going to be an hour where there's going to be a bit of a presentation, not very much, and discussion and questions. And I'm going to be supported by somebody from our tech support team who deals with the SSO queries that come in when something goes wrong with the SSO implementation. They know a lot more about SSO than I do, and I don't know very much. It's kind of a black box and it scares me, and it might well scare you as well. So the call to action is that you need to think about who you need to have in that webinar and go and find them. Find that shape person who has the knowledge about the identity provider at your institution and the rights to actually implement this. You need to be on the call with them because you hold the keys to the ArcGIS license locker through ArcGIS Online, and they will need access to that as an admin to implement the SSO linking. So you need to find that person and then get them into the meeting. Let me cough, my voice is back again. As I said, we're going to focus on SSO with the support of somebody who's an expert or more of an expert than me. I doubt they'll be able to answer absolutely everything that you throw at them, but they'll know who to go and ask and find the answers that you require to then fill in that jigsaw so as you can actually implement SSO, perhaps in your summer maintenance schedule. And the timing of this next webinar is the 31st of July, and it's deliberate. July? I've said July too many times. On the 31st, it's my birthday on the 31st of July, but you don't need to know that. 31st of January, Addy, focus on the message. Anna, who is our JISC representative, used to do license managing at Leeds University, and she always reminds me, and I know quite well, that universities schedule a lot of their summer maintenance in January and February. And what we want to do is to make it is easy for you to make the case to get this SSO implementation into, at the very latest, your summer maintenance schedule when there's less disruption to users across the campus, because generally there are some MSc students and research students, researchers and the lecturers. The undergrads, the large body of users won't be there in the summer. Now, we've got a date with marketing of the 31st of January. It's now not provisional. We've got it booked in. So Jenny, who's our marketing support, is going to help me get a link, and hopefully we'll send that out in the follow-up information. And then you can forward it on to the right person in IT. That's kind of like the call to action. And that's the end of what we're going to say, which leaves us about half an hour to look at the questions. So I'm going to go through the questions, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get more questions coming in. So the first one that came in was around batch loading of users, and it said that the template required some extra work from the last time that they used it. So this is running fully, and it didn't auto create new usernames. Now, Benny and I will go off and have a look at that, and we'll explore the best practice to make it as easy as possible. We'll create a story map to support the use, and then we'll circulate that around the group. So that's definitely one that we'll take on board, and we'll do a little bit of revision. I honestly haven't done batch creating of users in our account for a while. We've gone through a security sort of like audit, and our ArcGIS Online accounts are a lot more locked down with multi-factor authentication. But there's a way for me to do it, and I will go off and have a look. Uh, I think this next comment is really around setting up EU hosted nodes, which was coming in towards Benny when he was speaking. The answer is just below that I typed in. Email it to highered@esrauk.com. Now, that email address is checked by Benny and myself, actually, also Katie in the schools team. So, if Benny and I are off, then she's picking them up. It's the best place because it's not one single point of failure being one human being, it's checked by multiple. If you request it, what we then do is we place a zero cost order with Esri Inc., and they then add it in with maybe 50 users or 100 users for you to test. So full disclosure on that process, it might take a couple of weeks for that to get set up. Things to be a bit slow at the moment, but it used to be a bit quicker. Once you've got it set up, you can test SSO against it. And if your ambition is to actually have EU hosted data, this is Benny, as Benny said, this is the window of opportunity. You're going to make a change, make it now. Make two changes at the same time. I'm supporting a couple of universities with that process, and they're going, how can we keep the URL the same? It's on the old node. We wanted the same URL on the new node. There's a way to do it, but it's not click, press, done. You've got to sort of migrate them, changing the first one, letting that name lapse and changing it over. And I'm seeking advice from Esri Inc. on whether or not there's more elegant solution to that, but I'll look into it. But if you are thinking about doing it, press the button and action it now. It doesn't cost anything. You're entitled to have multiple ArcGIS online organizations, and it gives you the flexibility to explore what SSO implementation looks like, feels like, and how it works without accidentally doing something to your live node while students are relying on it. The transition period between the two is something that we can discuss, and we can support you through that journey with what we would consider to be best practice. What do you think's next, Benny? Batch works well, but yes, you have to put user IDs into the file. Works best if you download a sample file, blah, 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 blah. Yep, yep, works fine. We do understand as well that sometimes you don't get student lists until the last minute. So there's students, if you're setting it up just for a class cohort, there's flux. But if you can get for your second and third year students, you can get those in advance, and you could do an entire department in a year batch. And it won't take you more than 15, 20 minutes to do that. And if you think about that, if you can sort 95% of your users through maybe a couple of hours of admin, that's pretty good. The extra 5% users, which are going to come in ad hoc, are going to be more painful to deal with. But if that gets you over the speed bump of this licensing, then that's not a bad thing. Um, is there a way to remove large numbers of users, such as graduated students, and a long period of active users removed automatically? Yes, that's a really good question. It's one of my main concerns with the user management in ArcGIS Online as it exists today. I have been discussing this with my European colleagues and also the global team at Esri Inc. And I have a call in early January. It was scheduled for December, but some people were off, so it's now January to discuss this with the ArcGIS online product manager, which is great. And the head of education is facilitating that meeting. Now, in my head, I've got a very elegant solution, but I will pitch that. And what it would be is that you find users that have been inactive for a period of time, and you set a variable in the admin portal, say 12 months inactivity. A user goes from being active to being disabled. And then if the user has been disabled for more than another checkbox, so maybe your data retention policy is 36 months. So that would mean 12 months inactivity. To get to 36, you need to add 24. So after a further 24 months of being a disabled user, delete the user and their content. Done. Set it up once. Maybe how we set up default user roles. Maybe it's in there. And once it's set up by the license administrator at the organization, it runs in the background with no intervention. So it helps you to comply with your data governance at the university level, and you set the variables to fit that policy. It would also help us comply with GDPR in Ireland and UK GDPR in the UK, which is if there's personal data, which there could well be collected through a survey 123, um, you hold it for as long as you need it, and then you're legally bound to delete it when you no longer require it. So it will help on multiple fronts, but it also helps that annual churn of students. And as I say, I'm going to pitch my idea, which is also the same as the German education team's idea. And we're going to lobby for it and see what they say. In our heads, it's quite simple. We know that there are some scripts that you can write in the Python API to do this, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect you license admins to run Python scripts just to make a task work. There should be a button and a variable that we can set, and then it works seamlessly in the background. So that's our pitch in January, and I will report back how that went in the 31st of January call.
Yeah,
Slightly longer. Yeah, sorry, go
I
on, Ben.
can take over the next question, so you can take a drink or a break. Um, yeah, so the Python API is great if you want to have that kind of interactivity with your members. But like Adi said, we do not expect everyone to have Python scripts to manage their organizations. So hopefully we can come back with some good news in January. There's also GeoJobe. For anyone who's not using GeoJobe, it's a third-party software, but an Esri partner that you can download from the ArcGIS marketplace for free, and it gives you additional content management and user management that you can use. Is it correct that users will get licenses automatically if SSO is enabled? So that depends on the default new user you can set up. You can set it up for your students, for example, and then under the role you can give the privileges you'd like to have your students.
I'm
Yeah.
going to raise my hand on this, Benny. So I think on that one, it also depends on the way that you configure your SSO coming into ArcGIS Online. So when I look at the background stats of users, I can see there are 2 universities that seem to have auto-provisioned ArcGIS Online for all users in the university. So they're sitting on something like 12,000 ArcGIS Online users. There are other universities that I know have had SSO set up, and they don't automatically provision a user um, with an ArcGIS Online license. To get the license, the user has to go to ArcGIS Online. They have to type in the URL, or you can actually have a link and they hit that. And when they get there, it says, do you want to sign in with your SSO? And when you press yes, it creates the account the first time. So it's not automatically there. It is created when the user goes to the ArcGIS login page. And I hope that is 2 different answers that hopefully answer the question. But if not, stick something into the chat window. And if it's easier, you can unmute yourself if we have missed the point.
Yeah. Um, Yes, I reshared the survey, so sorry about that. You should be able to submit your feedbacks from now on. If not, shout and I'll have a look at that. And once again, you can find the links further up in the chat or on the Modern GIS page in Lecture with GIS.
So
Will
Anna's
there
going to circulate the webinar with the JISC list as well. So we've got 2 marketing lists that we're using. There's the Esri UK marketing list, which is derived from the support contacts listed in My Esri, which is another reason why it's super important to keep that up to date, and it's your responsibility to do that. I don't have access to it, but Anna also has the chest contacts. And these changes are so important that we are sending it out through multiple lists to make sure that it gets to the right person.
Yeah. Will there be options to manage add-on licenses using groups in AGOL rather than having to assign users directly? I believe this is done by roles, so you can create different user roles and you can assign which licenses and add-ons you want for each role. And for example, if it's a researcher rather than a student, they can have more privileges, more licenses, and different add-ons. So those are controlled by user roles rather than groups. Groups in general control the content that the user has access to.
And I think that's a question for us to go back to an SSO expert. I have heard from some universities that on the ADFS side, in this example, they were able to control who should and who should not have access to the ArcGIS online node. So they might want to restrict it back in those days so as it's only teaching staff and students and not researchers. Bit weird, but they could do that. Or to a faculty. So depending on the internal groups in ADFS, they could enable or disable it. And actually thinking on that, you've your estates and facilities team shouldn't have access to the teaching node. They should be using their own ArcGIS online organization, which is maybe not SSO'd because there's a smaller number of users there, or maybe it is SSO'd, but it is controlled by your identity provider, your ADFS or your Entra. And the group that you belong to dictates which node you go into and what you actually get. But as Benny said, you can also control it within ArcGIS Online. So if that's the easiest way for you, set everybody up as a student because they're by far the biggest number of users that you'll have in your account. But when the professor or lecturer or researcher says, hey, I need this extra stuff to be able to do my job, you go, don't worry, give me, what's your username? Yep, okay, perfect. I am boosting you up to be researcher or, lecturer. And then they're happy. So if you are just going to use the default, make sure your default is set for the biggest number of users that you will have, which will be students, and then tweak the people accordingly. Okay, so SSO is the start of the journey. It gets accounts created. I suspect that the harder task will be user management and also content management. Does Esri have standard tools already created for these? Blah, blah, blah. What are we doing? Does Esri have standard tools created? If not, I suspect that the Python programmers. Yeah, so there are actually the tools in ArcGIS Online have got a lot better in the last 12 months. And I have learned yesterday that the May update for ArcGIS Online is going to have a host of admin functions which are going to address some of the issues that we've already raised. I haven't seen what that includes, but hopefully I'll learn that on my call in early January and I'll report back what's coming. Beyond that, there's the fantastic GeoJobe tools, which you'll find in the marketplace. They're called admin tools. If we don't have a resource on how to access those and what they might do, you've guessed it, Benny and I are going to create one. They're good tools. They're a little bit confusing in some ways, and I think they should be in the main portal, but they are the next level. So you can, it essentially builds SQL statements. So you can filter users by groups, by roles, and then you can do batch editing to them, give them more privileges, take privileges away, delete their content, delete them as well. It's a batch editing tool.
It's essentially a user interface built upon the ArcGIS Python API for admining or AGOL.
Is the cost significantly increased with SSO? So if you're meaning the license fee that we charge, no, SSO is an enablement tool for you have unlimited users for academic use, and SSO is the sensible way to leverage that advantage and to manage it internally. It's also a hell of a lot more secure than setting them up and managing them manually because on the scary license document that you sign up to with the agreement, you've got the responsibility of making sure that only members of your institution have access to the licenses, and when people leave, that their access is truncated. That is an onerous task in an organization the size of an average sized university. With SSO, their access is truncated because they can't authenticate. It manages it. What it does is it divorces their content, and then you have to manage that content to comply with UK GDPR or GDPR at some point. And those are the admin tools that we're hoping will improve. But actually, there is no cost to doing SSO except your time or IT's time to set it up. It should then be cost effective in terms of the way that you manage your users going forward. Okay, Philip Wheeler, I have the feeling that we can't batch email users through AGOL, even if they have registered their email address. Is that correct? Not too sure. I think you can, but I may be miss Benny.
Uh, uh, The way no, you should be able to just put down the email address and username, and if you follow the template, then the user should receive an email, and then they can click on the email to set their account up and change their password.
I'd recommend getting the latest template as well. Some of my old templates don't work now because the variables that you have to fill in changed. So go and get
Yeah.
the new one, and we'll make sure that the instructions on how to do that are clearly signposted in the new page that Benny's already shared.
Yes, I would also recommend always checking the official S3 documentation. If you just do a quick Google, ArcGIS Online invite users, from there you can select batch user creation, and you'll find the template there and all of the steps and the different ways you can do it.
So next question is John's. Recently moved to SSO. How can you tell from a list of members who joined via SSO and who aren't? It's depending on the structure of the username looks very different to one that's been generated manually. So that's the easiest way. I don't know if there's a way to shut down. Well, you should have a date, unless everybody, if you've got to that point, that should be the only way that you're creating it. So the date that you implement it, you don't do the manual, and then anybody created after that date is SSO by default. But you'll notice that the usernames look subtly different. So when you're viewing your list of users ranked by the day that they were created, then you should be able to calculate it that way. I suppose this might allude to a second question on how do you migrate users from their old account to their new account, and we're going to provide you best practice information on that. There's like an old style FTP content mover, and if you're in the same ArcGIS online tenant, then it's quite easy to move the content from one user account to another. And we've got this AGOL assistant, which, as I say, looks like an old school FTP thing. You have to log in to the destination account and log in to the donor account. And then you select the stuff from the donor account and you press the big arrow and it migrates it into the new one. Once the user's done that, then there should be no content left in their account and you can disable it or delete it. But we'll check our best practice and put that into the page. Yeah, the offboarding of users who have left will just be as important as onboarding. I totally agree, Cameron. It is. And my only thing is that I think we've got a little bit more time to sort the offboarding than the onboarding, given the impending license changes. But that call on the 10th of January, or around about the 10th, is the start point for really lobbying Esri Inc. to think about what they're going to include in future releases to help us manage our users within this community, but also other enterprise clients, customers. So large councils, government bodies who have got thousands of users in their ArcGIS online organizations will also have this problem. And we need to think about it. There are two things. One, there's the data security and data governance part. But the other thing is it costs electricity to keep everybody's data alive. And if we keep storing absolutely everything, we're not doing a very good job of being environmentally conscious about what we store. You know, we shouldn't store absolutely everything in the internet. It's just insane to keep the lights on data, which is probably duplicated in other places. So we have to be environmentally conscious with it as well. But we'll see what comes from that January meeting.
Yeah. So just to clarify, everyone who you add to ArcGIS Online has a named user, and then the admin can assign the different licenses to that named user. There was a question, I think, previously in the chat. It might have been deleted, but it's a good information for you to have as well. Could you clarify if any security vulnerabilities come to light during March to July 2024? Will they be addressed or not? So I presume this question is for the security vulnerabilities Adi mentioned about ArcMap from March, and those vulnerabilities are because Esri won't be updating the software anymore, so it won't receive any security patches or anything of that nature. It's not to say that means that it is a vulnerable software, because it won't be up to date to against the latest malwares and other things. I presume this is what you were asking. If not, then let us know.
Arc
Yeah.
SWOT, I'll have to go and have a look. I don't have an answer at this time. I had to go and look at what Arc SWOT was, soil and water assessment tool. I'll go and find out, and Tom, I'll come back to you. My on-site license server for ArcGIS has an expiry date set as the 31st of the 7th, 2026. Will that be an issue? Now, Stephen, I'm not sure. I've had a long chat with Anna. Now, Anna has a long history of managing licenses and license servers, and she was like, if the licenses have been released, then they could have access all the way through to 2026 because the horse has literally bolted, or the licenses have bolted, and they're out there. So they may continue to work till 2026, and if that is the case, then that's the case. But I've had a couple of universities that have updated their servers recently, and the provisioning files that they had loaded onto the server no longer matched the expiry dates that were in my Esri, and they didn't work, so they had to rebuild them. And when the rebuild came, they were onto a 2024 expiry date. And I honestly don't know if there's a way for Esri, the mothership, to send messages about the dates not matching, and if there's a way that that will then cause problems. So the safest message is to assume that the licenses will stop on the 31st of July 2024 and expect that to happen. If they continue to work, then they continue to work. But if you assume that they're going to continue to work, there may be a nasty surprise coming on the 1st of August 2024. So we have to expect them not to work, even if the license manager has been deployed with those 2026 dates. When those 2026 dates came out, I was somewhat gobsmacked because it's not what I was expecting. And only by chasing through that problem did I find out why they had to do it. But if you remember back to the license renewal period, we were right up to the deadline. So I was happy that we had licenses, even if the expiry dates didn't match. But it was a system process that had to be done, and they've migrated them back. Uh, but I don't know what happens, Stephen. So we just have to assume and plan for that stop date of the 31st of July 2024. Okay, so Mike, we use ArcGIS License Manager on campus for our teaching clusters at present. Yeah. Should we stop using this in the summer and these dates will change? So again, I would have a plan for not being able to use that license manager on the 1st of August 2024 because it may not work. If you assume it's going to work, you're going to have potentially problems. So your contingency is to get to SSO. And if they continue to work, bonus, but don't assume that they're going to work.
We have 5 minutes left for
Yeah.
questions.
31st of March is a bit of a pain to stop updates. I know it is, but it's a global date. It's been well publicized over the last year or so. I don't think it's going to be a vulnerable piece of software on the 1st of April. I don't think it's going to find vulnerabilities that quickly, but it becomes an increasing risk. So you probably want it off your network. If the expiry date for us has been set as the 31st of July, which gets us through the teaching. Somebody also said that it might impact MSc students, but really we shouldn't be using ArcMap anyway. Our messaging has been clear about the transition away from ArcMap towards ArcGIS Pro. People are experiencing this, are doing the change right at the last minute. Now we'll continue to support them as best we can with that migration. But at the 31st of March is what it is, and it's not a date that we picked. It just is the date, I'm afraid.
Yeah. ArcGIS API for Python is handy to automatically create AGOL users, yes, and for deleting users as well. So I recommend checking out the developer website if that's of interest for you. GeoJobe is a very good tool. I use it, but there is a cost. So there are different plans with GeoJobe, and I think the free one is more than enough for managing content and users for AGOL. So I would go back to ArcGIS marketplace and search for admin tools and check out the free plan. Adi and myself both use it, and it's great. I'm pretty sure there is a a free version.
Yeah, and we're going to keep going through these questions, even if we go past 1/2 past, and I'll include them in the recording. So if you have to drop off for another meeting or you desperately need to go and get some food before your busy afternoon, don't worry, I'm going to keep talking through all the questions, and then you will get to see the final bit in the video. But if we go to the next one, which is Ian, if we're using SSO, surely the user is made inactive by the university account being inactive. Would we still need to remove the account? Yeah. So access is truncated, but the data persists. Now, there's a really good reason for that. And then this data governance thing that I'm lobbying to get put into ArcGIS Online would mean that those users would then be flagged for deletion at a time period which fits with your data governance plan in your institution. And then that means that when that time expires, you get rid of their data and you get rid of their account completely. And it gives you plenty of time to migrate that content out or to help the user to do that. But it also is it's a responsible thing. It's also a legal thing, but it's also environmentally important to not keep data beyond uh, the period of time that we realistically need it. Okay, Philip Wheeler, which question did that relate to? I have to go back up the questions. Okay, I might have to come back to you, Phil.
I have a feeling that we can't batch email users through AGOL, even if they have registered their email addresses. Is that correct? I think that was one of Philip's question.
Yep.
Well, we can come back to you, Phil.
Okay, so and John says that he's found a filter on the side for
Login
identifying
types.
login types. That's good. Yep. Excellent. Phil's helping John before we can get to him. So great. And you know what? The community that we're part of is going to be important. So maybe if you've got success stories, we can share them. We can set up maybe another webinar after January where we get people showing you what they've done and try and form that community to support people. Otherwise, you're just going through the change. I learned yesterday at another university that they actually got somebody to set up the SSO for ArcGIS. They didn't do it themselves. They outsourced that job. And in the Netherlands, they actually have a group which is not dissimilar to how Adina work in geospatial. And they do the technical implementations of SSO for all kinds of software. And that company is wholly owned by the universities in the Netherlands, which I think is a great idea. But we don't have that at the moment, as far as I can find in the UK. Can SSO be used for an internal portal as part of ArcGIS Enterprise? Yes, is
Yes.
the answer. Your named user identities are then just attached to your portal rather than the global ArcGIS online user list. So yeah, Will, you can, William, sorry, you can set up Enterprise and Portal, and you can issue named users, and then it's essentially giving you all of ArcGIS Online, but on premise with a gateway which connects those users to the data that exists in the cloud that they may want to consume, which might be Living Atlas, etc. But it mimics ArcGIS Online entirely, but your database of users is on your own infrastructure.
Um, so Justin asked, with SSO, can users check out licenses for use in the field when offline for extended periods? Yes, so it works the same way as if you add them individually. You can borrow RJS Pro licenses for up to a certain period of time. We only recommend this option if you are truly have to be offline, and the user will have to return the license on the same machine. Otherwise, that license will be blocked for that one piece of device. So I would only recommend borrowing offline licenses if you absolutely need them offline.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think the way of retrieving misplaced borrowed license isn't quite as good as it could be. And with the move to named users, I think that needs to be improved. I'm interested to see what the plans are when I meet up with the AGOL team in January. So I'll be writing a list of questions. But if you think there's questions that I should be asking, use Benny's form, survey123, to raise that. There's a note section at the bottom, so you can put stuff in that doesn't fit with any of the questions. Gail's just reiterating that she's been using GeoJobe and it's pretty good. Yeah, it is. It just allows you to filter users and get to just the ones that you want to manage and then manage them in a batch tool. Not all of the functionality is there. I will explore like what the current pricing is for GeoJobe Pro and whether or not there's any flexibility on that. The people that run GeoJobe are pretty friendly, so we can always ask. Yep. So we'll do the SSO.
Yeah, we'll send an email, and Chest will send out emails as well about the upcoming webinars. Um, and this webinar, the recording will be accessible in a follow-up email or from the Lecture With website.
Yeah. So Christian, yeah, that's an interesting point. It's a global variable. So could it be set to a user type? So you maybe have a user type which is field, and they're the only ones that can take licenses offline. That's a really good suggestion. So that's something that will go into the pool of questions I'll be firing at this poor individual from Esri Inc. But it's a really good question.
Um, Gail asked, we have a 6-year content retention policy for that used for summative assessments. What would be the best way to manage this, migrate this content and users to another AGO site, or keep it in the AGO site that is used for live teaching? I would probably make the users inactive, so they don't have access to the licenses if they have graduated, but the data and the content will sit under their account for 6 years. And if they ever need it, you can uh, reactivate the user or just send a link to the data or content.
And that feeds into what we are lobbying for is this sort of disable user and then delete them automatically after you get to the 6 years. That would solve that. Yep, find out how to filter people. How do I download or export the list? I'll look into that and we'll get back to you, John.
There's also a report builder in ArcGIS Online if you're an admin, which is quite useful. So I would recommend that as well. It's a good way to kind of keep track of who's using what, how much, and who the people are.
Yep, I can feel that you're going to be creating a story map on that, Benny, with a few best practice videos. That would be good. Okay, so we've got to the bottom of the questions. We've still got about 57 people on the call, which is incredible. Hopefully it's been useful, but please do use the form to inform us of what you want and what information you think is missing or what you're worried about. Um, and then we'll try and structure some information. I think one of the questions is like, how do you want to receive the information? We have this chest steering group. We've not met in person this year. I can't remember last time. No, maybe we did earlier this year, but we can meet in person. But actually, Teams is a really good way to get to a wider audience. Maybe some mail shots would work. Maybe it's just the story maps and the videos on topics coming out regularly. Just keep us informed of what you want, and we'll do our best to support you. And if you have questions that you think are best directed off the form, please do use highered@esriuk.com and just ask us. There's no such thing as a silly question. Just keep asking. Magic. Well, I'm going to go and drink more hot water. My voice has survived. Thank you very much for spending part of your valuable lunch listening to this. And please do keep in contact with us.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.